Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a piece of history that's been hiding in plain sight. It's a story about the ghost that haunts the machine of our modern financial world. So let me ask you a quick question. Who invented digital currency? I'm willing to bet one name just popped into your head, right? That mysterious, anonymous figure who dropped a white paper on us all back in 2008.
Well, what if I told you that's not the right answer? Not even close. The real story begins much, much earlier. Because the true pioneer of digital cash isn't Satoshi Nakamoto.
That's right. We have to rewind the clock. Way, way back. To 1989. This is where one brilliant cryptographer laid the entire groundwork for everything we think of as crypto today, long before the world was even remotely ready for it.
His name was David Chaum. And you gotta understand, he wasn't just thinking about digital payments, he was actually building them. His creation was called DigiCash, and it was the world's very first attempt at an anonymous, electronically transferable currency.
And I want you to just let this number sink in for a minute. 20 years. We're talking 20 years before Bitcoin's white paper was even a glimmer on the horizon. I mean, that's not just a head start, that's an entire generation.
And what's really wild is that Chaum's motivation sounds incredibly familiar today. He imagined a world where your financial privacy wasn't protected by trusting some big bank or government. Nope, it would be protected by math, by pure cryptography. The whole idea was to completely separate a person's identity from their transactions.
So, how did he actually pull this off? Well, the secret sauce, the core of this whole thing, was a brilliant piece of cryptography, a technique that made money both digital and anonymous back in the late 80s. It all came down to a single, really elegant breakthrough. You could almost call it a magic trick.
It was called blind signatures. Now, the best way to think about this is to imagine you put a dollar bill inside a special envelope, one lined with carbon paper. You hand it to the banker, they sign the outside of the envelope, and that signature presses through right onto the bill inside. So the bank knows they've signed a dollar, but because it was obscured, or blind, they have absolutely no idea which specific dollar bill they just authenticated. So the process worked in 3 pretty simple steps. First, you'd withdraw a digital coin from the bank. Second, the bank would apply its blind signature, which validated the coin without ever being able to trace it back to you. And third, you could then spend that coin with a merchant, completely anonymously. The merchant could verify the coin was legit, but they couldn't see who spent it. It was absolutely revolutionary. Now, this all sounds incredible, doesn't it? Secure, private, digital cash? So why aren't we all using DigiCash today? Well, this brings us to the central tragedy of the story, the fatal flaw that was hiding in this brilliant idea. It's the question that just hangs over this whole thing. If this technology was so powerful, so far ahead of its time, why did it just vanish? Why did it ultimately fail? Well, it really boiled down to 2 things. First, its biggest flaw was centralization. You still needed a traditional bank to issue and verify the coins. This created a single point of control, a single point of failure, the very thing modern crypto tries so hard to avoid. And second, it was just too early. In the 1990s, the internet was still in its infancy. The idea of e-commerce was a novelty. The world just wasn't ready. And the timeline really tells a stark story. DigiCash is born in '89, a little less than a decade later. In '98, the company goes bankrupt. And then a full decade of silence. Nothing. Until 2008, when Satoshi's white paper finally shows up and picks up that trail that had gone cold for so long. But that's not the end of the story. Because even though the company died, the idea lived on. It became that ghost in the machine, an echo that would inspire the next generation of thinkers and builders. See, the dream of private, secure digital money didn't die with DigiCash. It planted a seed. The cypherpunks who would later create Bitcoin were deeply aware of Chaum's work. They saw both its genius and, more importantly, its critical weakness. When you put the two side by side, the evolution is crystal clear. DigiCash required you to trust a central bank. Bitcoin distributed that trust across a decentralized network. Chaum had solved the anonymity problem, but it was Bitcoin that finally solved the centralization problem, the very flaw that had doomed its predecessor. So in a way, Satoshi didn't invent something completely new. They took Chaum's ghost and finally gave it a body it could survive in. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating thought. The story of DigiCash proves that an idea doesn't always have to succeed to change the world.
Sometimes its failure is exactly what's needed to pave the way for the next breakthrough. It makes you wonder, what other ghosts, what other failed ideas from our time are just waiting for their moment, quietly shaping the world of tomorrow?